History is written by the winners, but the greatest legends, they are the ones the world tried to break and couldn't. In 1940, the most powerful military leaders made a cruel decision. They said, "These men cannot fight. Keep them away from the front lines, let them clean boots and drive supply trucks." They were treated as weak, they were treated as less than ordinary. But when World War II became an absolute nightmare, when the enemy was winning and American soldiers were dying in the frozen snow, the generals had to make a choice they swore they would never make. They unleashed a secret weapon no one saw coming. This is not just a story about war. This is the story of a brotherhood that fought two battles at the same time. One battle against the deadliest enemy on earth, and another battle against the very people who hated them back home. The world expected them to fail. Instead, they crushed everything in their way. Imagine this. You are ready to die for your country. You put on the uniform, you raise your hand and take the oath. But your own country treats you like the enemy. This was the brutal reality for the men of the 761st Tank Battalion, the men who would soon be known as the Black Panthers. They were America's first black tank unit, but the military did not build this unit to fight. They built it to be forgotten. They were sent to training camps with terrible conditions. When they left the base, they had to sit at the back of the bus. People spat on them in the streets. They were insulted every single day. White officers looked them in the eye and said, "You don't have the brains to drive a tank. You are not smart enough to fight." And for 4 long years, they just trained. The military refused to send them into battle, not because these men weren't ready, but because the leaders knew the truth. If these men become heroes, they would have to treat them as equals. And they were not ready for that. But then Adolf Hitler changed everything. It was late 1944. Europe was freezing. Hitler's army was crushing the Allies. Thousands of American soldiers were dying in the snow. And the situation was so desperate that General George Patton, one of the proudest, most stubborn generals in American history, had to forget everything he believed. He gave a direct orders. "Bring in the Black Panthers. I need tank drivers and I don't care what color they are." When the Black Panthers arrived in France, General Patton stood before them and said, "Everyone is watching you. Go out there and destroy the enemy." The Panthers heard his words, but they also heard what he didn't say. The world wasn't watching to see them win. The world was watching, waiting for them to fail. On October 31st, 1944, the Black Panthers entered the battlefield for the very first time. What happened next changed history forever. Think about one man, Private Ernest Tops Morrison. He had been insulted, ignored, and pushed aside for 4 years. But on that October morning, he climbed into his tank, looked at his brothers beside him, and made a silent decision. Not one step back. That decision lived in every single man of the 761st. They were kept on the front lines for 183 days straight. No breaks, no rotation. When other units were pulled back to rest, the Black Panthers were pushed forward. During one critical battle, they were ordered to take a heavily defended French town The German army has bigger tanks, more men, and the high ground. The mud was so deep, their tanks were getting stuck and destroyed one by one. American vehicles were burning. But the Black Panthers refused to retreat. They drove straight into the enemy lines through fire, through smoke, through fear. In a single day, they captured a town that the rest of the army had failed to take for an entire week. Hitler's soldiers were terrified of them. They gave them a name, the Schwarzen Soldaten. The black soldiers, a name spoken with fear, not contempt, because whenever these tanks appeared on the horizon, the enemy knew only one thing: run. In those 183 days of non-stop combat, this so-called ordinary unit liberated more than 30 towns from the Nazi control. They destroyed some of Hitler's most dangerous armored regiments. They fought all the way into the heart of Germany, and when they got there, they broke open the gates of concentration camps and saved thousands of innocent lives. They did what the generals said was impossible. They proved that courage does not depend on the color of your skin. It depends on the size of your heart. When the war ended and these men came home, there were no parades waiting for them. No medals put around their necks on television, no presidents shaking their hands. The same system that used them as a weapon tried to push them back into the shadows and bury their story. But you cannot bury the truth forever because of their bravery, their sacrifice, and their refusal to break. The United States military was eventually forced to change its laws and allow every man to fight as an equal. The Black Panthers did not just win a war, they cleared the road for every generation that came after them. So the next time someone tells you that you are not good enough, the next time the world tries to make you feel small, ordinary, invisible, remember those 183 days. Remember the men who were told they couldn't and then went out and did the impossible anyway. Because to break down barriers, you don't need the word's permission. You just need to find the legend already living inside you. If this story moved you, subscribe to Ordinary Legends. Every week, we bring you another story of an ordinary person who chose to be extraordinary. I will see you in the next one.